Welcome to the Nick Hilera Show. This is the place where we explore big ideas with people having a big impact on our world. I'm your host, Nick Hilera, serial entrepreneur, author, early morning riser, and seeker of truth and wisdom. Join me as we explore the journeys and discoveries of fascinating people who are literally unlocking the secrets to creating a life of both success and fulfillment. Each episode will arm you with insights, ideas, and practical perspectives on what it takes not only to be financially and personally successful, but also how to start having authentic impact on the world around you. Greetings, everybody, and welcome back to the Nick Hilera Show. This week, we are featuring Afam Onyema, a co-founder and the CEO of the GEANCO Foundation, an organization that is saving and transforming lives in Africa. Afam and I crossed paths briefly back in our Stanford days, but only recently reconnected. As we were catching up one day over coffee, and I learned what he's been up to all these years, I knew instantly I had to have him on the show. What you are about to hear is one of the most inspiring discussions I've ever had. Afam is someone who decided at a young age to forego the traditional pathways of modern success, giving up a promising career in the law to pursue a path of service. He stands out as one of those rare individuals who felt the call and then actually answered it. In this episode, you'll learn how Afam evolved from Harvard football star to promising corporate lawyer to the co-founder and leader of a startup foundation, how he used the entrepreneurial toolkit, the same thing many of his Harvard and Stanford contemporaries were using to try to get rich, and applied it to the nonprofit world with astounding success. You'll also learn why Afam feels so motivated to do this work, why it's important as a leader to focus on relationships rather than being transactional, and how Afam managed to recruit Stanford alumni, Hollywood executives, and even big-time celebrities to support his foundation. While there's so much to take away from here, what stands out for me is this. The path of selfless service, Afam's path, is an incredibly rewarding path. Truly amazing things can happen when you orient yourself and your work around a noble and selfless mission. And Afam's journey, his story, and his work are all a testament to that. I just know you guys are going to love this inspiring episode. Thanks for tuning in. Hey guys, this is Nick. I wanted to take a quick break from the episode to share some exciting news. In addition to the podcast, I want to make you aware of some additional content we're putting out. And best of all, it's 100% free. Our Profit Plus newsletter consists of weekly insights about what it takes to find meaning in the pursuit of modern success. This is the place where we explore big ideas at the intersection of markets, business, politics, and life as we seek to empower our readers to have an authentic impact on the world. If you're serious about finding fulfillment amid success, then definitely check out these additional insights. Just go to subscribe.nickhilaris.com. Again, that's subscribe.nickhilaris.com. Now let's get back to the episode. All right, well, welcome back everybody to the Nick Hilera Show. Today we have a special guest, my friend from a long time ago. In a different life, it almost feels like a different life.
Yeah.
Afam Onyema, who's a co-founder and CEO of a nonprofit called GEANCO, which we'll get into what that stands for in a little bit. But Afam, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Nick. It's great to be here.
Yeah, you know, I was thinking about how to start this conversation, and just kind of going back in time, thinking about how we first met, 20 years ago at Stanford, and I was even though we're basically the same age, I was like a 3L.
Yes, you were wise.
And you were like a 1L. So, I didn't really talk to you that much.
Oh, no.
So
you guys
sorry.
are way too cool for us. That's for sure.
But it's been good to reconnect. And you've been up to such a cool mission, very unusual compared to like the rest of our law school colleagues. And I figured the best place to start is tell us what you're up to. What's GEANCO and what have you been doing for the last 15, 20 years?
Sure. Yeah, no, thank you. Well, GEANCO's mission is to save and transform lives in Africa, particularly in Nigeria, my parents' homeland. And it falls into two buckets, that mission. On the medical health side, we bring surgeons over to do special medical missions. So for years, we did hip and knee replacement missions. And then about 5 years ago, we started doing minimally invasive surgeries, which is just a way of doing hernia surgery, gallbladders, appendix, kind of general internal surgery. So we bring doctors and surgeons over, we train local surgeons, and we equip them to hopefully be able to do some of that work when we're gone. And then we recently, I'd say the last 3 or 4 years, started a clinical program where we take 40-foot shipping containers and then repurpose them into family clinics. So these are clinics where women deliver their babies safely, where these babies get vaccinated and treated, where women get their healthcare needs met, and also men get prostate exams and blood pressure checks and all of that. So we take these clinics, they're in the very rural, poor areas of Nigeria. They're solar powered and self-contained, so they don't have to rely on Nigeria's terrible electric grid. And we found that the need they're meeting and the people's attraction to them, the idea of delivering your baby on a dirt floor in a tin shack is, to me, just a lack of dignity and just is an affront to decency. So now these women are delivering in our clinics in safe environments with trained staff. And so we've been doing that work on the healthcare side. And then on the education side, we started a scholarship. I started it with the actor David Oyelowo, who is probably best known for playing Martin Luther King in Selma. He's been in Lincoln. He's been in Jack Reacher. He's been in a bunch of different movies and shows. But the concern there was you have all these girls who've been affected by Boko Haram terrorists who have been kidnapped, orphaned, abused, and we can't fight them, but we can take these girls and put them back in the school. And so we started that about 2015, 2016 with 3 girls at one school. As we're having this conversation, we have 42 girls at 5 schools throughout the country and continuing to grow it and have gotten really great support in Hollywood for it that we can talk about later. But the goal is just get as many girls in the school as possible. And we support those schools structurally with computers and sports fields and libraries. And so all the kids can benefit from the work. So that in a nutshell is basically what we're up to in Nigeria.
Let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsor. This episode of The Nick Halera Show is brought to you by Metros Capital. If you're an investor looking for direct access to real estate investments, then we'd love to talk with you. Investment opportunities at Metros Capital balance financial returns and community impact. To learn more, contact us at metros.nickhaleris.com. Again, that's metros.nickhaleris.com. Now let's get back to the episode. Man, that's really impressive.
Thank you.
Yeah. I guess some details.
Sure.
On the medical missions, like how many medical missions are you all doing a year and what's the scale of that operation?
Yeah, well, the first mission started in 2005, and it's one of these things where it's amazing how these things come about. So my aunt was working for an orthopedic group in Chicago, and they were talking about doing a mission anywhere. They wanted to just go India or maybe Haiti or somewhere. And of course, she being part of a Nigerian family said, you need to come to Nigeria and do it with this fledgling organization, GEANCO, which we had just kind of had the idea of, and it was the very first thing we did as an organization. And I was at law school, so I couldn't go. So I ended up helping fundraise for it and plan it. And then the team went and did about 23 to 25 hip and knee replacements. The first time that many surgeries have been done at that particular hospital in Nigeria. And just hearing the stories and seeing the pictures of these patients' lives change forever. I think something that people don't realize is that person who got a new hip or knee, that was their only option. It wasn't as if, well, if they miss this mission, the next mission's coming along, or they can go abroad, or Bill Gates is coming next week, or what have you. No, that was it. And so you realize you changed this person's life forever, changed their family's life, because then people are going back to work or back to school or living their lives again. And I just love that idea of being able to make a visceral impact in that way. And so as I graduated and started GEANCO, made some connections with a company that actually made the instruments and the artificial hips and knees that were going into people, a company called Zimmer Biomet. I met their chairman, John McGoldrick, and he was so supportive and said, if you guys want to do it again and kind of get it going, I'll have my company support it. And that was 2011. And then kind of 2011, we started doing it on an every other year basis. So 2011, 13, 15, 17. And then by 18, a good dear friend of mine from college, Kevin Olhayek, who's the minimally invasive surgeon, wanted to get involved. And so we're able to do that one in 2018. And then our goal was to do a mission every year. And that was the plan until COVID. But we only missed 2020. We went back on 2021 and now are hitting that every year pace, and we're trying to diversify the missions. So we're doing minimally invasive this year, but I'm looking to do eye surgeries, dental surgeries next year, and continue to open it up. And it's usually, it's the surgeons coming over. For the ortho missions, you have 25 to 30 people because you have the 3 or 4 surgeons and their assistants, and then you have anesthesiologists and nurses and OR techs, and they're really big groups. And for the minimally invasive missions, basically just the surgeons and maybe one assistant to help kind of the flow of patients and whatnot. And every year we get more sophisticated and we learn more, and we've moved to a much better host hospital. So they're taking over a lot of the anesthesia and post-op care. And so I just love the growth of these missions. I love the fact that for these recent missions with minimally invasive surgeries, we've added a training component. So 24 doctors from all over the country, men and women, come to the hospital to scrub in and help with the surgeries. There's a lecture component. There's a kind of lab where they're practicing their technique. And they just, to see the fire and enthusiasm in their eyes and their passion for this is one of the best things about these missions, as well as obviously the patient outcomes and how good those are. And so hope to keep them going to do one a year. If we have the funding and can build up infrastructure, it'd be great to be able to do 2 a year. But right now, our focus is on keeping this 1 year, 1 mission a year pace going.
And what's the issue in Nigeria? Is it just lack of financial resources, or is it lack of qualified medical training, or is it all of the above?
I think the one thing that drives it is lack of investment from government. Government just does not invest what it needs to in healthcare in general. And there's so much raw natural talent in Nigeria that is forced to leave. The choice is either stay in Nigeria, work for a substandard hospital. Doctors and nurses and medical staff are constantly on strike because they haven't been paid in weeks, months, years, in some cases. And so either you deal with that environment, or you take your skills and your family and go to the U.S. or the U.K. or Australia or what have you. And my father did that. A whole generation did that. Doctors to this day are doing that. So Nigeria is losing so many talented doctors that want to stay, but just don't have the infrastructure. And so that's a huge issue, and that redounds into, okay, so you don't have the staff, and so you're getting substandard care because the best doctors are leaving, and then the government is not investing, and so people are having to pay for everything out of pocket. They don't have the means, and so if you're rich, you either go to one of the few quality hospitals in Nigeria, or you fly to the U.S. You fly to London. The president for the past 8 years almost spent as much time in London for medical treatment than he did in Nigeria, and there's no shame about it. It should be embarrassing if President Biden was going to London or to Canada for treatment for anything. It would be a national scandal, and it should be. So lack of investment from the government, and just corruption at all levels of government. Though mostly at the higher levels, we've had great experience working with the local and state governments. They're poorly resourced, but they have passionate people who want to help. And we've been able to kind of step in and as much as we can as a small organization, do what we can to fill the gaps, however we're able to.
Yeah. If Nigeria is like that, like where do they rank in the broader Africa rankings of healthcare?
I think one thing that people have to understand is Nigeria is just a massive country. It's 1 out of every 5 sub-Saharan Africans is Nigerian. And so it is 180, 200 million people in the country, and it ranks fairly low. I think this is some years ago, but out of the 200 plus countries in the world, Nigeria was 187th in terms of infrastructure. The Economist, again, this is some years ago, but they did a kind of called a misery index of all the different scales in terms of infant mortality, maternal mortality, and all that. And they kind of ranked countries in terms of where would you not want to be born as a baby. And Nigeria ranked last. It was the most dangerous place, the worst place to be born as a baby, and it hasn't changed much. It's just as talented as Nigerians are, and if you mention. Whenever I mention, oh, I'm Nigerian, I guarantee everyone to without fail says, oh, my doctor's Nigerian, or my best friend is Nigerian, or I love this ex athlete or ex musician. So Nigeria exports so much excellence, and shows excellence when it's able to, but the country itself doesn't benefit from it. And it's just like one of those just really painful, soul rendering ironies that we try our best to both counter and also rally those Nigerians who are successful around the world, whether they be actors, and we talk about the actors and all those athletes and notable people, both Nigerian and Nigerian, to try to do what we can to empower those who are still in Nigeria and just need some help to achieve their goals and to maximize their potential.
Yeah, so it sounds like they've had like a massive brain drain, like decades long brain drain.
Definitely.
Which your family members are part of that, right?
Yes. No, there's no doubt. And our parents originally, their plan was so they were both born and raised in Nigeria. My dad went to a British boarding school. Nigeria was a British colony until 1960. So he grew up as a British subject, as my mom did. And she went to an Irish boarding school. My dad went to a British boarding school. He was inspired by a British missionary doctor when he was young and at that boarding school. And so he fell in love with the idea of medicine through watching her do her thing and care for people. And so he made a promise to that doctor and my granddad, his father, that no matter where I go and what I do, I'm going to come back to Nigeria and make a difference, make an impact. I will leave, but I will come back. So I met my mom. They moved to Chicago in the 70s. And their plan was to, learn medicine, raise some money, come back to Nigeria. But then I'm the second of 4 kids, and then realized we had amazing opportunities here in the States. And would it be fair to pull us back into a country that was going through military coups and religious violence, and unfortunately a lot of the things that they're still dealing with, 4 or 5 decades later. And they realized that no, it's not fair. That we should they should stay for us and put us through, give us a chance to maximize our potential. And I think thousands of Nigerians and other Africans, if not millions, had that same discussion and same decision. Like, we need to stay for the family, for our kids. And so I'll always be grateful to them, because I just the opportunities that would have been cut off and extinguished had we moved back to Nigeria, to not be able to maximize whatever potential I have in me, which makes me so eager to help those who are in Nigeria to maximize theirs, because I was able to from here. And so there's so much potential and this raw energy and verve, both in Nigeria, but also this diaspora. So now we have all these Nigerians who are 20, 30, 40, into their 50s, who have grown up as first-generation Americans, who are mad successful in entertainment or business or finance or real estate or what have you, and they want to give back. And so being able to be a conduit for them, I love having this conversation with them, and they get so excited because they're like, I get to continue to be a partner at Goldman Sachs, or I continue to be, Amazon Studios, or I continue to win be in award-winning movies, but I can act through you, through a foundation that I trust, that has a track record. And so that's been really gratifying as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. The other mission that you're focused on, did you mention, is this education one? Mm-hmm. And when we met a few weeks ago, I found myself like super interested in that one. I feel like the story behind it is kind of heartbreaking,
yeah,
but the mission is like so pure and so needed. Tell us a little bit of the details, because it's kind of sobering.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I wish I could take credit for creating it, but it was one of those things where I've been here in LA, and through a mutual Nigerian friend I was connected with David Oyelowo, the actor. And it was really that conversation. Like, we had been only doing medical work, healthcare work. He mentioned the idea of helping these girls. And originally I was hesitant, because I'm like, oh, well, this could be one of those things where a celebrity suggests something, and then 2 months later they're on to something else, and then we create this thing, and then it ends up collapsing. How do you tell these girls, oh, we only had enough funding for 1 year or whatever? So I I'll never forget, we're in his home. We're sitting there in his living room, and I said, listen, we can consider doing this. We can do this, but you have to be a true partner, not one of those celebrities who shows up at a gala dinner once a year or tweets about it twice a year or whatever, like uses it as part of their brand. Like, we have to kind of roll up our sleeves and be partners. We have to find ways to raise money. It's going to be tough and unsexy. You have to call in favors, and and do asks. And he said, listen, when I commit to a character, when I did Martin Luther King, I spent that year plus as Martin Luther King. I was in character the entire time. When I commit, I'm in. And I'm in on this. And so he made that agreement. And to his great credit, he was and has been, and really opened up a lot of Hollywood to us. He's just really well regarded in the industry, and was able to get us amazing supporters. Oprah, who was one of our seed funders, and we had support from people like Daniel Craig and Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt's production company and Charlize Theron. Like, it's just been really great to partner and to be able to utilize and access those who want to be helpful in that world, as well as others around the country and around the world, really. But for me, it's such a joy because these girls have done nothing wrong. They're wholly innocent. They just want to learn and maximize their potential and just be doctors and lawyers and policemen and politicians and presidents, and because of terrorism, because of honestly just like sexism and misogyny, they're not regarded as fully human. And to be able to look them in the eye and say, no, we care about you. We want you to be wholly yourself, and we will do whatever we can to empower you. And I just remember each class of girls, especially the first three, come in and they were literally starving because they were in refugee camps or living on the side of the road or what have you, and they were just not eating, and they hadn't been in school in years, and looked at us like, what is this? Like, what are you doing? Like, there's a lot of apprehension. And then they get to school and they start learning, and then you see that transformation over a year plus. And we had our first girl graduate in 2020, and just to see her as a whole person, first of all, just looking physically great and becoming a leader in her class and winning a contest for writing essays and just being able to speak and look you in the eye and have dreams. And she ended up, after graduating, taking an assistant teaching job in a refugee camp with other girls who were just like her. So definitely a full circle moment that David and I and others were just so emotionally moved by. And seeing that with each class of girls has just been amazing. And just seeing them get full step into themselves. And then last year, the summer of 2022, we did a leadership summit. We brought as many of the girls as we could together over a week. And my two sisters and my female cousin designed the program where, how can you empower these girls? How can you get them thinking about themselves as leaders? Because it's a leadership scholarship. Our idea is to inspire leadership in all its forms. And just seeing these girls learn about leadership and what's their leadership style and how do they deal with conflict, and how do they, we even did, script writing and movie skit, because we have so much support in Hollywood, and just seeing them write these stories and act in them and learn about directing. It was just amazing. We had girls say that, my parents want me to be a nurse, but I want to be a lawyer. And I've learned how to advocate for myself and tell them I want to be a lawyer and be a strong advocate. And again, these girls they're not the future, they're the present. Like, I've learned and been inspired by them. And I want to go from 42 girls under scholarship to 4,000 to 40,000 to 4 million. And it's just a matter of raising the funds to do that. But it's the joy of my life is supporting those girls, seeing them grow. And I'm just grateful to David for the idea. And I just love that we have an idea. It's not one of those things where, let's kick it around or figure it out, or you do it and it fizzles in a year. I mean, now we're going into our 7th, 8th year of doing it. And I'm just as excited as I was day one.
Yeah, I can imagine why you would feel that way. How did these young women end up in refugee camps? Like, what's the backstory there?
Well, a Boko Haram, a terrorist group in northern Nigeria, would come through a village, come through a section, and just ravage it. They would kidnap girls. They would murder their parents. They would murder anyone, for religious reasons, political reasons, what have you. And so families would be driven to refugee camps, the UN or other aid groups. A lot of the girls, unfortunately, were abandoned. The parents said, we have sons, or we have a son, and this son is more valuable than our daughters. They would literally leave them in front of churches or mosques or on the side of the road. And so you have these girls who just would wander to a camp saying, I don't know where my parents are. They kind of like drop me off. And so you have this deep sense of abandonment. And the camps are kind of one of the few places of safety because the UN would ostensibly be there to protect them. And so it's, I just seeing how they're living in these shelters that are basically just plastic shacks. And I just one video that our team took in Nigeria and showed me and just shattered me was one of our girls walking from those plastic shacks through the refugee camp to the bus stop where she got the bus and went to this school. And this school has, libraries and computers and sports field, and she's learning about physics and Shakespeare, and has her mind just opened up and filled. And then at the end of the day, hops in the bus and goes back to this shack. And I thought, well, at least she has those 8+ hours that she can learn and be inspired, and then getting to meet them and just seeing how much they just value that experience, how grateful they are, how hungry they are. And you just I hear from their teachers and principals that like they're the ones that stay late and come early and are asking questions and just want to just take this opportunity and suck the marrow out of it, which is super inspiring to me. We have yet to have a girl in this program who grumbles and, oh, like, I hate homework or I hate this. And we probably get a lot of that in the US, but there they see the opportunity and realize how fortunate, how blessed they are to be able to do it. And they never for a moment forget that, which is very humbling for us.
Yeah, in America, it's so easy to not have that perspective, essentially.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because we have a lot of problems in this country, but they're of a different character than than like living in a refugee camp. That's a whole set of way more extreme circumstances than, even living in like a crappy neighborhood in Los Angeles. It's
Absolutely.
not even close, actually.
Yeah. No, it's really, it's difficult for people, unless they are people who go on medical missions or the people who help us out with the scholarship. They go and they have no idea. It's to be in this room and the power hasn't gone off once. Whereas if you're in Nigeria, it would have gone off 3 times. To have the roads that aren't roads, main highways that are just basically dirt and mud and just the clean water. And whenever I come back from Nigeria and just turn my tap on, I have clean water whenever I want it. I have power whenever I want it. I have 8 different types of toothpaste to choose from. I can, the internet is on and what have you. It definitely calms me and makes me so grateful. And again, it also, you realize like, okay, like a little bit of traffic on the 405 is inconvenient, but not sometimes it's life-threatening, but like it's often not life-threatening. But Nigeria, there's so many things that are just make life so difficult. And the fact that they confront it and they'll literally get up singing. Like it's amazing how many times, we're working and you just hear people singing in the morning, just happy and joyful. And our patients who don't, like, oh, I don't need pain medication post-surgery. I'm fine. I'll be able to handle it, which is amazing. And I mean, I never forget for our medical, it happens every single medical mission, that the doctors are like, as soon as our patients wake up, the first thing they say is, thank you. God bless you. Very first thing, not, where's my Vicodin or my morphine or, every single patient says, thank you. God bless you. I can't believe this is amazing, and they all comment on that. And they wish they had that for their practice in the US. And those surgeries make them better surgeons. Our surgeons will say like, day 1, first surgery, that was the toughest surgery I've ever done. Like that knee was horrible. It should have been replaced a decade ago. Or man, that gallbladder surgery was so tough. And then the next surgery, like, no, that was the roughest one. And so it's really a matter of perspective for them and for me. You can start a foundation like this with kind of rose-colored glasses of, I'm going to go over there. It's going to be wonderful. But it's the most challenging thing I could possibly do in life, certainly the most challenging thing I've ever done in life, and was brutally difficult the first couple of years, like, darn near broke me. But you push through it and you just see the impact grow, and you see our GEANCO family of supporters grow year to year, and now a decade and a half into it doing full time. It just is immensely rewarding for me personally. And I still get up every day, both terrified and inspired about the opportunities that we have to make an impact.
Yeah. I want to follow up on that, but before I forget this other question, the scale, you mentioned that you're trying to grow this education program for the young women to big numbers. Like how big, like how many people are in these refugee camps? How big of an issue is this in Nigeria?
Nigeria has the second largest number of kids out of school, about over 10 million, almost 11 million, which is second only to India, which is a billion plus people. So it's the worst problem in Africa, second worst problem in the world. And so a lot of them may not be in camps, but they're in their villages, just, it's hard to say this, but they're rotting away, or will get married off early. Okay, there's no chance of you going to school. You're 12, you might as well get married. And so you have 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds who are getting married, having kids at 13, 14, and just not being able to live lives of meaning and become it's dangerous physically. It becomes dangerous to their emotional health as well. So the need is just overwhelming, and just obviously, and the government should be taking care of, 10 plus million girls and boys out of school, because those boys then get recruited by Boko Haram or other terrorist groups or gangs, because it's like, hey, you're not going to school, you're not being taken care of. We're your family now. We'll take care of you. And then go strap this bomb on and go into this village, or go and sell these drugs or what have you. So education, having them educated, again, having a government that has schools that are quality, but just aren't just shells, is critical. So we're not the answer to that major problem. Our goal is just to help as many girls as possible. Out of that, 10.8 million, can we just help 5 more, 10 more, 100 more, 1,000 more, 5,000 more? No, we'll never make a huge dent, but if we can inspire others to step in, or help the government step in a better way, and looking at those girls and saying those individual girls, their lives have been changed forever. We're not putting them through school and expecting, okay, go save the world, go find a cure for cancer. No, just if you want to go through school and become an amazing mother, or a local teacher, or a government official, or someone who's an engineer or whatever, I just want to help you on whatever path you're inspired to go on. And that's kind of the goal that we have for the scholarship and for the girls, and make sure that they don't feel pressure. Like, go learn, be a kid, play soccer on the weekends, go learn about Shakespeare, learn about physics, have crushes, have your heart broken, come back, like, just live lives that are full and complete. That's the main goal.
And do you think, back on this brain drain topic, do you think the graduates of your program are going to stay or leave?
It's a good question. And people ask that a lot. And I think one thing for us is we don't provide scholarships. So we provide scholarships from the end of primary school, kind of the equivalent of U.S. middle school, through secondary school, the equivalent of a high school. So people then ask, well, what happens after that? And I say, well, at some point, we can't provide 12, 13 years of education. Like, we get them to that point, and there are other ways to get college scholarships. We help some of our girls do online education and what have you. There are other organizations that do college scholarships. So it's like we're not worried about those girls graduating from secondary school and then immediately coming out to the U.S. And some can, if they find a way to do that. There's an organization that does that. That's fine. But because all of our girls so far have stayed in Nigeria, hasn't really been a point. And we'll never be an organization that funds scholarships in the U.S. That's just not. I have nothing against those organizations, and I know a lot of very prominent ones that do that. It's just not our goal. Our goal is to educate girls in Nigeria to make those schools the best that we can. So I'd rather find a really good secondary school, a really good, maybe one day a really good university, and pour our resources into that university so that becomes better for all the local students and girls and boys. But yeah, our goal isn't to have girls come over here for permanent. I'd love to bring girls over I mentioned a leadership summit that we did in Nigeria last year. Love to do one here in LA, where we bring some of our talent to teach them about acting or writing, and bring some of my friends who are engineers and coders, and have like a week or a weekend where they just learn all these things and get to experience Disneyland and go to their first baseball game or what have you. That would be a dream if we had the funding and the opportunity to do that. They open these girls' eyes up to something like that. But our goal is to really create leaders in Nigeria in all the fields that need them.
Which it sounds like is unlimited need at this point.
Unlimited, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you weren't always on this path. There was another path that you were on, to be, let's go back to the beginning, a football player.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, so I grew up in the south suburbs of Chicago. We were born in Chicago and raised in the south suburbs. Yeah, and I played football through kind of from second grade, probably too young back then, through and I got recruited to go to Harvard, and then played football for a couple of years there, and had a hip injury that ended that NFL dream before it fully coalesced. Probably for the best, but then like got interested in the idea of the business of sports and potentially like becoming president of a team or a VP of a league, or just like I love the idea of the business marketing side of sports. And so I did corporate PR for 3 years, and then worked for a law firm doing PR for a bit, and then decided I wanted to get another degree, and went to law school, Stanford, of course, and loved my time there, and had this dream of, had my own career plan. Like I was going to, do corporate law for a bit, but then segue to a team, to a league, maybe to, a talent agency that had sports, attached to it, like a CAA sports or what have you, and kind of find my way up that path. And my dad had this dream. He told us about this doctor that inspired him when he was young. And I'm like, that's great, Dad. When I'm rich, and or famous, I'll definitely help you with that. But that's something I can do on the side as a pro bono kind of my thing. But I had like this professional plan. And it was really kind of as I helped with that medical mission in law school, and then just started, I go from property class over to the medical school to learn about malaria. I go, I do torts in law school, but then I go to business school and learn about how do you form a 501c3? How do you run an organization? And it was just like this. I just loved Stanford because it just was a beehive of activity and energy. And it was always like, whatever idea you had, it was like, yes, how do you make that possible? It's like, yes, and, as I say in improv, as opposed to, oh, no, that's impossible. And why would someone be able to do that? So I summered for corporate law firms in LA because I was thinking about living in LA, and I loved my experience with those firms. You just get to see a very fancy, expensive, unrealistic side of LA, when law firms back then were just like posh, and you're going to the best restaurants and best social outings and what have you. But
yeah, they try to seduce you.
They definitely
to take the job.
I was willing to be seduced. It was. I remember thinking like, I am not worth any of this, but I will have another steak dinner. Thank you. It was amazing. They definitely have pulled back on all that now. I feel bad for not too bad, but I feel bad for law students who didn't get to experience that. But it was an amazing experience, and I made lifelong friends and supporters, ironically, through that experience to now. But I was in school. I realized, okay, I could take this path to kind of corporate law into sports business, but this fledgling idea of helping in Nigeria would die on the vine. Like we as a family, didn't have the money to hire someone. Really, my other sibling, I have an older brother and 2 younger sisters, and neither of them none of them were willing to kind of take it as their own thing and full time push it. And you really need someone doing it full time. If you have an interested donor in Denver, someone's got to hop on a flight and be in Denver, or to be able to have a coffee in the middle of the day or what have you, as opposed to someone trying to squeeze it in. And then so I was, I had my corporate law offers, 2 of them. I was a 2L, and just realized, or 2L going into 3L year, and I just realized, gosh, I get up every morning, like I said a little bit earlier, both terrified and inspired by the idea of doing this work, this GEANCO work. And I did not have that feeling for my corporate law work. And I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, I need to do this now. Because everyone was saying, oh, you can always, make some money and work for a law firm. You can always come back to this. And I knew I wouldn't, because then it becomes, pay off your law school loans, to pay off your mortgage, to pay off kids' tuition or car. It's like you blink and 30 years have gone by, and it had never happened. And so I just took a leap and said, you know what? I want to be able to make an impact now. I want to do it while I'm kind of young and somewhat vibrant and don't know what I'm doing. And if I fail, if I go bankrupt, I can come crawling back to the law firm and say, take me back. And so that was I took the bar exams. I wanted to be a lawyer and go through the process. So that was the summer of 2007, and then moved down from the Bay Area to LA in the fall of 2007. You get up one day in September and say, all right, start trying to save the world and, and go from there.
Wow. So you never even took a job?
No. Yeah, no, this was my first and only job since law school. Again, it's crazy. But yeah, I never, besides my summers at law firms, never worked as a lawyer. Yeah.
And that time too, like Lehman Brothers was failing. Like it was kind of a
Oh,
crazy
yeah.
time, right?
Oh, it was the worst time to start. It was terrible. Yeah, because it was it was late '07, so eight and nine, we're trying to build an organization, and like I didn't even know how to fundraise, and then all of a sudden, companies are collapsing, Great Recession, with the world going through depression. I think people forget how scary those times were and how uncertain. And I'm out there hat in hand trying to raise money for, and people can go on our website now and see all these pictures of the girls and soccer fields and surgeons doing surgery and all that. We had none of that. I think it's just, I had an idea. People were funding an idea back then, not even like a fully thought out idea, and so I will never forget those early donors who remain current donors and friends, a lot of them, who just believed in me. And I had a professor at law school who had a generous philanthropist and had a passion for Africa. And I told him, I'm turning down my offers and I'm going to do this. And he said, okay, whatever you have in your bank account, I'm going to double it and use that money to just live and survive, pay your rent and eat and get some space to be able to do this. And then I had a friend a year behind me in law school. And he asked a lot of questions about when I told him about the decision. It turns out his parents are very, very wealthy, and they've been supporting us ever since. And I had my friends, my law school class. We had a fundraiser for GEANCO, our very first one, at the Sheraton Palo Alto, and almost all of them showed up and donated. I'll never forget. I was kind of off to the side, and one of them, my friend Cody, pulled me aside and said, to be honest, like none of us really care that much about Nigeria, Algeria. You probably couldn't find it on the map, but we care about you. We're here for you. We're giving to you and through you. We know this is good, but just know that we're here for you. And there are very few people in our class who could get 2/3, 3/4 of the class to show up on a Saturday night to a fundraiser for something in Nigeria. And that always meant a lot to me. And one of the great joys of this work is being able to stay connected with my classmates and schoolmates and alums, because it's a reason for me to reach out and make these connections. And a lot of them have been incredibly supportive personally. A lot of them open doors that have led to some of the great entertainment and celebrity stuff that we've been able to do. So it's, like building our GEANCO family and growing it is really all I think about, the work in Nigeria, but like just how do we make that possible through growing connections and networks here in the US and again, throughout the world.
Which law professor?
So it's David Mills, the Mills Clinic. Yeah. I took his white collar crime class, and shout out to Jay Kraft, who was a year behind me. I'll never forget. We were driving to get lunch, and we were trying to figure out our classes for the semester. And he's like, "Oh, you should take white collar." And I'm like, "I don't plan on defending white collar criminals or becoming a white collar criminal. I fail to see how that's going to be relevant." He's like, "Well, this guy who teaches it, he's really, really wealthy and very generous. And I know he cares about Africa. I saw a picture of him and Nelson Mandela in his office." And I'm like, sold. And so I went to the class. I loved it, first of all. This is a really interesting topic. He is a very interesting guy and has a great background. And again, it's very generous. And we got along. And I'll never forget, I mentioned that we had this conversation in his office. Like the last day of class, he literally just walked up to me and like handed me a check in the middle of the class. He was like, "Oh, I know this is kind of awkward, guys, but here you go." He's been a generous supporter ever since. And I tell him to this day, and I'll tell him till the day I die, there is no GEANCO without David Mills, and no GEANCO without the family of my friend and some other key donors. I mean, when I graduated from law school, came to LA, I sent, and it's hard to believe nowadays, but like handwritten letters to 1,000 different alums, Stanford and Harvard, my undergrad institution as well. And thankfully, both Stanford Law School, the Stanford Lawyer magazine, and then Harvard magazine wrote articles about what I was doing. And so I was able to include that as like, this is not some crazy Nigerian scheme. Here's an actual validation. And you send 1,000 out and maybe 2 or 3 dozen respond, but those 2 or 3 dozen built GEANCO. Like they just, through their money, through their connections, they built GEANCO, and you're able to kind of expand on that because of these people who, again, were giving to an idea and the hope that this would work out, as opposed to, I want to give to these girls. We didn't even have a scholarship back then. We had these fledgling medical missions and not much else. So I just be forever grateful to those. And hopefully anyone who's hearing this, the idea of giving to people and giving to ideas and taking a leap, I just hope that stays. I hope that in this world of hard data and if I give $1, I want to know exactly how many people are going to benefit, which is all great. But just the idea of, you're a passionate person, you're a good person, you're a smart person, you're a dedicated person, I'm going to invest in you. And it might fail. You might not be able to do this, but I'm going to give you a chance. I'm going to support you, because if it does work out, then hundreds, thousands of lives will be impacted, and I get to be a part of that. So I just could not believe that and advocate for that more fiercely than I am.
Yeah, I think it's so important. And I believe if you look behind the sort of success story of any individual, there's always something like that.
Yeah.
There's one or two people, or maybe a bunch of people who believe in that person.
Yeah.
There's no self-made person. That's like
absolutely
fantasy.
Yeah. No, and there shouldn't be. I think the idea of having help, I think that people often ask, I got to the point where younger people and people my age or even older will ask, for advice or insight. And I tell them, like, I can tell you the mistakes I made and what to avoid. But I think one thing that has been really important in my journey, in my work, is just vulnerability. And like, I'm coming to you asking for help, and I'm not dressing it up as anything else. I would like your help. I like your partnership. And there's a sense of, it's power dynamics, and you don't want to come across as weak or whatever. And I'm like, no, I need this person's help. I want this person's help. If they say no, I'll find someone else. Like, we are going to get girls educated and patients seen, but I'm coming to this person asking for their help, whether a donation, an introduction, access, what have you, and being vulnerable about it, and not being kind of subservient or weak or jeopardizing or your morals or ethics, but just saying, I'd love your help. I can't do this by myself, and to be able to do more and help more people, I want you to be a part of that. And I think vulnerability is a superpower that a lot of people either don't have it or are afraid to use it, because society tells us vulnerability is weakness, and weakness is not a quality that anyone wants to even be around, let alone have in themselves.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest BS myths of our entire society. Because it's like, if you look at the truth behind any great leader, that's what really makes that person great, is their willingness to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Even though we're so afraid to admit it, but that is like the core. It's the ability to set aside your ego and understand that whatever the ego is trying to get you to do is actually not the right path.
Absolutely.
The better path is to, be willing to ask for help, be willing to listen to other people. And people respond to that type of leadership so much better than the sort of commanding control or I'm the strongest person in the room.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And I've heard that from our donors, whether they be, Oscar-winning actors or billionaires or just kind of a Girl Scout troop, it's a story. First of all, they're giving to a story. They're giving to something that's based with, my father did this and I'm doing that, as opposed to, I was hired by GEANCO and now I'm doing this. If I get hired by a different organization, but also just they respond to that. It's like they are allowed to let their guard down. If you're vulnerable with someone, and I've had these conversations, 100 times over, where I'm vulnerable, then they can be vulnerable and they can say, this is what I'm worried about. This is what I care about. And you make that contact and that connection. And it's more than transaction. It's more than I need to extract as much money as possible from you. No, it's let's do this together. And I want to get to know you. I want you to be a partner in this, as opposed to just someone who I pump up for cash or hit up for connections or whatever. That's just not, I'm the least transactional person you'll meet. I despise the idea of, I'll get this, you get that. And I think that's that's the worst. To me, that's the worst part of our world is when we're transactional and we're get what for what. And in my world too, in nonprofit world, it's very prevalent, the idea of hit them up and do this, and I'll give you, you give me this, I'll give you that, or I can't operate that way. And I think if we've had any success, it's because we as an organization don't operate that way.
Yeah, I'm with you. The transactional style is just really not something I can relate to.
Yeah.
And I think like on a surface, it appears as if the whole world is transactional, but I'm kind of optimistic about it in the sense that that's not really true. Like behind the really good stuff that you see in society are people who are not being transactional with each other. They're developing relationships and trust and working together. Yeah. Even though the transactional stuff seems like it's like prevalent, I don't think it is. I'm not sure.
I agree. I think it gets celebrated. It gets pumped out there through social media and all the ills and evils of that world. But I do think that kindness is can be well hidden, but I believe it's kind of like the fuel and the unseen energy. And I always tell people like it's the most important thing to me in the world is being kind. And the thing I respond to most is kindness, and it can be rare because again, it's not celebrated; it's viewed as weakness and what have you. But I think those who, if I talk, people ask me about X celebrity or X billionaire or X person, and I'll just say they're a kind person. They're kind, or else I wouldn't even have a chance with them because I can give them nothing that they can't buy or get themselves. And so I'll agree with that. Like our world is a mess in a lot of ways, but if you look at some of the glimmers of light and hope, it's because people are kind, people are vulnerable, and I think people want to be, but they're afraid of being hurt, they're afraid of being taken advantage of, and as much as people can let that go and lean into kindness and vulnerability, I think that's where success is, and sustained happy success. Not I will get X number of millions of dollars, I'll get this house, or I'll get this life, but I'll be miserable, which I think happens, more times than we can possibly count.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's a really good lesson in your story too about human nature. Like even the most successful people, they want to be helpful, and it just takes the courage to go and ask them.
Yeah,
they might be as busy as ever. The top of their game or whatever. But at the core, like most people want to be helpful. And if you're a young person and you have a dream, there's like nothing wrong with just going and hat in hand and say, hey, I need your help. And it works like more often than not.
Yeah.
Way more often, I think.
I could not agree with that more. And I think that's one of the keys for us is that I'm not afraid to ask, fearless about it, and ask for the right thing. Some of this, we have a number of celebrities and high profile people. And I was talking to someone who's like, oh, how do you do that? Or I want to get someone. I mean, all right, if George Clooney walked in right now and said, all right, this is interesting. Like, what do you want? And they're like, just like help us, maybe like tweet about it or whatever. And I'm like, no, you have got to have concrete asks. You have to walk to someone and say, how can I make this as easy as possible for them, as doable for them, and effective for us? And that's your homework. And whether the person's famous or not, and not everyone can write a check, not everyone should write a check, but if they can offer access to something, if they can offer an experience, if they can offer an introduction, like think through more than just give me money. 'Cause yes, like you can get go away money from someone, or you can build a relationship and they can open their Rolodex to you, and you can get access to companies and things to auction off or experiences. And I think that's something that we've worked on and thought a lot about is this celebrity can write a check, or they could offer us tickets to a premiere that we could auction off to someone who gave us even more money, or we can offer off, a chance to meet them on set and they don't have to travel anywhere, have to worry about like, budgets for hotels and private planes, or if it works for their schedule, like try to make it as easy for them as possible. I think that's really key is just being fearless about asking, and not being afraid of hearing no. That's people are afraid to ask, they're afraid to hear no. Or even worse, for me, it's silence. Like hearing no is resolution. It's a period. Like no, or this is not my. I very rarely get like no, like go away. This is awful. I usually get this is great, but we support homelessness in LA, or we already have a village we're supporting in Kenya, or we're into stuff with politics and government all great. But for us, it's also like, oh, that's great, but maybe like talk to my cousin or talk. Like, I try to find some way to help you. For me, the most painful thing is sending an email or having a meeting and then not hearing anything. Like, we're not even worthy of a response, which is a blow. I think it's anyone who's ever, whatever stage, whether they're married or not, like asking someone out and then not getting a response is probably a lot worse than asking someone out and hearing a no. Sorry, I'm seeing someone else. Or I'm not interested. Which also sucks, but it's like at least I got a response. And so for me, that's the worst. The silence is, but also it's like I've emailed someone 14 times, and that 15th time, oh, I'm so sorry. I feel awful. Like, my kid was sick. I changed jobs, COVID, what have you. But like, what do you need from me? That's me. Like, I've gotten that before too. And so it's all, silence isn't necessarily always a no either. It's will you, like, there's so many books and idioms about sales, like the seventh time you get it, or like the successful guy or woman or what have you is the person who got through six no's or six, send out seventh time or the eighth time. And, there's the ancient Chinese proverb, like, fall 10 times, rise 11 or whatever. And I just believe in that, and no one's going to take money out of our account or hurt GEANCO if you ask them and they say no, or you follow up again. So I try to keep that, though it's tough. I mean, it's a blow. We all have egos. We all have self-esteem and self-esteem issues. And so it's not fun. But in the end, I always think, okay, I'm doing this for these girls and these patients, and they're worth it. They're worth a blow to my self-esteem. They're worth a blow to my ego. So that helps keep me going during those rough times.
That's such a cool perspective. And your story too is a story, in my view, of entrepreneurial success. You've been running this foundation as good as any of the entrepreneurs that are celebrated. I think people, when I'll include the links, but when they go to your website and they see like the people that you've been able to attract to be serious donors to your organization, it's like literally like Hollywood A-list. And you might end up like teaching a course, like how do you go from writing 1,000 handwritten letters to getting donors like Oscar-winning actors and actresses and Oprah, and like literally it's a who's who. That might be a separate interview that we have to do, is how do you actually do that? But
yeah,
what a story, man.
Well, thank you. That's very, very kind of you. And it's, when you're in it, you don't think about it. You're just thinking about what's happening next hour, next day, next week, next month, next year. But my siblings and some of my friends will say, hey, like, we'll be at a gala and you'll see, Benedict Cumberbatch doing an interview on the red carpet, or Charlize or whatever. And they're like, hey, just take a moment here. Like, this was an idea in your head. This was your father's dream, your sibling's dream. And like, you have freaking Doctor Strange here, or you're like, we do something with the Oscars and getting to go and meet the host. Like, you're on literally the Oscar stage, the night before, talking to the host. Like, take a moment. That's not nothing. That's, I'm always thinking like, okay, like, what's next? How do we do? So I am trying to pause a bit and reflect on that. And, I'll take a step back when we're in Nigeria and just watch the clinic work. Like, the patients come in, the baby's being checked, and someone's getting tested for HIV over here, or a baby's getting vaccinated there, a woman's getting, and you're like, this was a barren piece of ground 3 years ago. And you played a role in talking to one family and pursuing them and having them give money to you with the idea of building this and having a team in Nigeria who could execute it. And now, for years, maybe decades, like hopefully decades, babies are going to be born. They can come back and say, I was born at this clinic, and they can bring their kids and say, this is where I was born, not a tin roof, dirt floor shack, or, in the back of some hovel. They were born in a clinic that, has Mickey Mouse sheets and has solar power, and, we're surrounded by love and care. So I try to balance like thinking of that and being grateful and letting that hit with, okay, like, how do we do that more? How do we get more? How do we get more? How do we do more? And it's a balance, a constant balance. But thank you. Yeah, just being able to, it's crazy because I never envisioned myself as a leader of anything, like in terms of building something from scratch. I always imagined myself as a worker bee. Like, I never wanted to be the commissioner of the NFL. I wanted to be one of the guys below him whispering in his ear. I never wanted to be like, the owner of a team. I wanted to be the person saying, hey, this is the idea of like creating something from scratch and building it was never in my constitution, but that's just, we have these callings in life, and we plan A, and then B, C, D, and E happen, and you kind of just have to roll with it. And I learn every day, I fail every day, and I learn again, and I fail again. And that's kind of the joy of life, is failing and falling and rising again, and having great, amazing people in my family and outside my family who are part of this, and I get to do it with them. And that's an amazing thing.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting that you say that you never envisioned yourself as a leader, because just observing you and listening to your story, you have all of these sort of innate characteristics of entrepreneurs, which is like, there's not many people that would send 1,000 letters or would make the type of ask that you've done, and organize something like, you're sitting here in Los Angeles, like putting together a medical clinic. Just the logistics of putting that clinic together is an entrepreneurial effort. Yeah. And you seem to do that. So I find it interesting that you said that you never saw yourself as a leader, because that's all you've been doing.
Well, thank you. I think part of that's probably just like not thinking about the almost like not thinking about the leadership part of it, just like thinking about getting something done. And I think for me, my leadership is finding amazing people and empowering them to do the work. And so we have an amazing program manager who's the opposite of me. He's an engineer, very type A, very systems and structure. And so I'll say, we need these clinics, and he'll find someone to design them, and let's try this there, and let's try to like tinker with this, and they should be solar powered. And he'll come to me and say, okay, I've tinkered and all that, and we have a great team ready to go. Can you get us the 60, 70,000 to build this clinic, or the 200,000+ to build 4 or 5 of them? And I'm like, that's my job then. And then I go and try to make the connections on this side. And so a lot of it is for me just empowering people, and just seeing them think of things I wouldn't even thought of. Like I remember going back to Nigeria one year, and our program manager's like, "Oh, meet our first intern." I'm like, "Oh, you have an internship program?" He's like, "Oh yeah." And that's a great idea. What a great idea to be able to build into to young Nigerians that way, and have them come on the team and learn before being hired. And so, as opposed to like, why wasn't this sent for my approval? And I didn't, and there are times we have to say like, yes, I have to check growth. I'm the one raising a lot of the money, 90+% of the money. So I can say, well, we have money for this and not that. And this is mission creep. And so you do provide direction. But as much as like, on a medical mission, I'm not in there saying, pick that patient, not that patient. Oh, no, cut here, cut there. I mean, you raise the money, you get to recruit the team, then you let them do their thing. And then same with the schools. Like we provide the library and kind of physical infrastructure, but I don't go in and say, teach less of this or teach more of that, or I don't want these things taught. Or so it's something I'm embracing more, the idea of being a leader. And I think part of that, again, it's finding great people and inspiring them. And then how do I, less leadership and more influence, obviously, with our donors and supporters, because none of them have to give us $1. There's no one on the planet who has to give us anything, which anytime you receive a check or donation, it just boggles my mind, because they can get their tax write-off anywhere. And the fact that this person is taking money that they could have spent on Netflix or some wine or a trip to Tulum or what have you, or their kids' tuition, and is saying, no, I want this money to go to support these girls or this surgery, or just here's the money, and I spend it however you think is best. I think that is probably the most satisfying validation of leadership and trust, is like, I'm giving you this money that I don't have to give you. And the feeling I have of just gratitude, humility never goes away. We can get $1 billion, and if we get $1 more, I'll feel the same way, because again, no one has to give us anything.
Yeah. Going back to the decision, go back to 2007. Mm-hmm. What do you think allowed you, as a young man, ambitious young man, highly educated, best schools in the world, basically, to make that decision to say, you know what, I'm going to forego this path that I've been on. Essentially, I was going to, be in the sports business or whatever. What do you think about your background? Like, what allowed you to make that decision at such a young age?
Well, I want to give credit to my parents. They were just they were firm in that they wanted us to, there's a lot of discipline in the house. I mean, we're kind of African immigrant family, so a lot of discipline, but also a lot of freedom. Like we lived in the age of, go ride your bikes or go play with your friends and be back, or go to school and do well. Like we're not going to be checking your report cards and all that. But if we hear one negative thing, you lose that trust, you lose that confidence. And so growing up, I kind of made my own decisions in terms of, do you want to play this sport or not? Do you want to do this or not? But if you do it, you better do it well. Like you better excel at it. And I think going into making this decision, it was interesting because I say all of that, but my parents very much wanted me to. My mom in particular wanted me to be a doctor, and I was pre-med all through college. And part of that was kind of being the one bright hope in this African family, Nigerian family, of being a doctor. It should be at least one. And it wasn't going to be my brother, and my sisters weren't even entertaining the notion. And I was a day away from, I took the MCAT and everything. I was a day away from mailing my med school applications out, and just couldn't do it. Didn't have the passion for it. And my mom was to this day deeply disappointed, but got over it. And, said, okay, well, your path is your path. And looking back at kind of where I came from, the idea of I didn't have a great passion for being a corporate lawyer. And even if I thought, I'll put my head down, just have these 2 or 3 or 4 years of just not being happy, but making a lot of money and making connections and then moving on, I just thought, life is so precious, and I just want to make a positive impact in the world. I just wanted to help empower people and to serve in some way. Like I really thought a lot about service, and service is very important to me. And I thought this is a way to serve, to create this foundation. It's so, as we mentioned earlier, so outside my comfort zone in terms of leadership and entrepreneurialism. But I thought, you know what? It's time to grow up. Basically, it's time to. This is the path. This is the way. And once I made that decision, it just clicked. I never once doubted it. I never once thought like I should. But I made the decision to not go to medical school. Never once thought about it in terms of it being a bad decision. When I turned down my law offers, it was a struggle doing it, but I never thought, oh, I should have made the decision and been a corporate lawyer. And as I get older, you realize the financial sacrifices. Like it's just amazing how, my savings right now are the equivalent of what I would have made as a second or third year, in a law firm. And especially living in a place like LA, you think about like being able to buy a house, or do all these things, and you realize there are real consequences to these decisions. But for me, there are also 5 clinics where babies are being born as we speak, and there are people who literally have new hips and knees in their bodies who would not have, and girls who at this moment are learning about the conjunctive verbs, and are reading Shakespeare for the first time, or are writing scripts, or are goalie in the soccer game and winning it for their team. And like trading that versus a house or a nicer car, which are all fine. I would take both if I have given to me, but I'm given a chance to serve, and it's challenging and frustrating, and sometimes all the time moves much more slowly than I would like. But it's also invigorating and inspiring and connecting and nourishing, and it's just what I should be doing. Like I think, and that gives confidence to our supporters, because I'm like, listen, I'm going to do this today, tomorrow, next year, 40 years from now. I'm not going to get hired away by a different organization. I'm not going to like shrug my shoulders and go, this sucks, this is too hard, or I'm not going to get hired away by NFL or Disney or what have you. Like, this is what I'm doing, and I want to do it with you for foreseeable future. And that brings great comfort to our donors, to my family, that I'm in. This is what I'm doing, and it'll grow and change, but I just want to continue to serve, and I'm so glad I get a chance to do it in this way.
And where did that come from? The service part. Did you grow up in a religious household?
We did. Yeah. So I mentioned my dad grew up in a Anglican Episcopalian church and boarding school. My mom grew up kind of Irish Catholic, and then so growing up, went to Catholic schools. I went to Catholic school from preschool through high school on two different schools, preschool to eighth grade, and then through high school. And then we went to Anglican churches growing up. And so we've always been a religious family. I've always been I've always believed it's always been a core of service. In general, I don't consider myself a Catholic or a denominational. I consider myself just someone who wants to serve and to be a good person. And certainly, like, it roots me and grounds me. It kind of helps me think through decisions and choices, and so that's been very helpful. And what I believe is aligned with what I do, which I think is one of the great blessings in life, regardless whether you're religious or not. Like, being able, whatever you believe, whatever your system of belief is, being able to have that align with what you do, as opposed to, well, I know I do this, but I also believe this, and I kind of make up for it by this, that, and the other. Which, again, is, I'm not judging anyone for decisions they make in their job. To be able to kind of say, like, I'm living out what I believe, is just brings harmony to life. And as difficult as life is, and I have just as many, if not more, stresses and issues and trauma as everyone else. Like, I get to say, well, I get up every day and get to do something that aligns with what I believe in, and that is a great comfort.
Yeah. One of the things that really was a motivator for me doing this was that I noticed this phenomenon in my own life, but also in the broader culture, that where people essentially, they come to the conclusion eventually, almost everybody comes to the conclusion that you came to in that 2007 moment, which is service is an important component of the human experience, and you need to dedicate a significant amount of your time to it. Most people figure that out later, and they take the path that you almost took, which is, okay, I'm going to do corporate law. And you probably already, if you had done that path, you would have been donating and giving your time along the way. Many people don't even do that, but they all want, at some point in their career, they're rich, powerful. Then they're like, oh, wow, I need to give back. Like, I don't feel right. Something's not right in my life. And so they'll fund in an extreme case, they'll fund a museum, or they'll donate, or they'll do pro bono law, depending on the circumstance. But it's almost universal where people come to the realization that you came to in '07. And there are some lucky people like you who figure it out early. And then you can have that alignment. And just the whole way, your whole life, essentially, your whole adult life, you've been doing what you thought was right and in the world, which is cool.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah, it's everything you said was spot on in terms of people get to a certain point, or I have conversations with, once I make a little more money, once I kind of get my bonus, or I sell this company, whatever, then I want to start doing good. And I never want to challenge anyone in terms of their spirit, but I've learned in this work that generous people are just generous people. Like, you either live with an open hand or a closed fist, and giving someone more doesn't make them more generous. It makes them more them. And so if they were generous with a little, they're generous with a lot. It's just a basic tenet. But, it's in the Bible. It's in other books of faith. The idea of you just become more you. And people who kind of struggle with that, how do I align who I am and who I want to be with what I do? I always tell them, go be the best corporate lawyer. Go be the best partner at Goldman Sachs. Go be the best actor. But find ways within that work to do good, and just support something. And it's a selfish way of saying it, but you can partner with someone who's already doing really good work, and suppose everyone creating their own thing or doing their own thing. And I know a lot of our donors get great comfort from that they can say, okay, I can go full bore with producing this show, or being on set, or being in my office, but knowing that I'm supporting you and supporting these girls or supporting these patients. And I think it's, I always, my thing is, everyone on the planet, everyone certainly hearing my voice, should have something outside themselves and their family that they are supporting, that the world is a better place because they're doing X. I believe that so firmly. It could be giving money, it could be volunteering at a local soup kitchen, it could be doing a medical mission, it could be cleaning, going to the beach and cleaning it up. But there should be something that you do that does not make your life better, like directly, or make, benefit redounds directly to you or your family. Because taking care of your kids is great, but that isn't, that's not philanthropic. It's to find something that you don't have to do, and do that. I always tell my family and our board and anyone who supports us, if your GEANCO work is convenient, you're not doing a good job. Like GEANCO service, whether through a board or through, it should be inconvenient. I often talk to my like David Yellow was a big supporter, and Chiwetel Ejiofor as Nigerian actors, and some others. I told them, I'm going to inconvenience you. I'm going to ask you uncomfortable things about asking a friend to give us access or whatever, because this should be inconvenient. Like supporting these girls should be inconvenient. And if it's inconvenient, if the most painful thing is inconvenience, and that leads to a girl being freed from refugee camp or no longer being raped or being able to learn, or a patient being freed from constant agony, that is darn well worth it. And if it's not, then we shouldn't work together. And so find something that inconveniences you, that pushes you beyond your comfort level. That's just difficult to squeeze in between work and family and kids and soccer practice and working out and time with a loved one or a spouse or what have you. Like, it should be hard and you should make it happen, because I just believe in rigor. I believe in that sense of like, this is hard and I did it, and I'm a better person and the world's a better place because I did it. And even if it's literally just I made this beach a little bit cleaner.
Yeah, man, I love that articulation. Like, we live in a culture where we're obsessed with self-optimization and these things, and Silicon Valley's got people trying to live forever and all this stuff, and looking for the easiest way to do everything. But I really believe psychologically that your point about inconvenience is right, which is if you find something that you care about that actually is inconvenient, but you do it anyways, you always get more than you put into it back out of it.
Absolutely.
And it ends up improving not only the mission, whatever that mission may be, whether it's cleaning up the beach, but it improves your own life in a material way. And more people need to be focused in that direction rather than how do I have so many productivity hacks that I can make more money, or whatever people are trying to do with these productivity hacks.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. It's like you're more time for you, basically. You're carving out. Yeah, I believe in self-care very powerfully, and mental health and having space and all that. But I just don't believe like that the world should revolve. Like it's a dangerous place for me if I'm the center of my universe. If I'm only concerned about how does this affect me, and those are the worst people. Like you talk to someone, whatever you tell them, they talk about how it affects them, or they turn the story to them like, oh man, I hurt my foot the other day. Oh yeah, my right arm hurts too. Right? We all have those friends or family members where everything gets spun around to them. And so I think just doing what we can to fight against that urge and just being, again, serving. I think wherever I am, whatever I do, I think, how can I serve in this situation? How can I serve you and your listeners in this conversation? How can I serve our girls, our patients? How can I serve the person who cut me off in the 405? How can I serve my loved ones? And I may not always do it. I'll think I should not react this way, and I'll react that way. But at least I'm thinking about it. And I think if everyone can just think in the moment, how can I serve in this situation? Serve someone else in this situation. Maybe someone's already written a book about it. If not, someone should. And I don't know if that person's me, but like that should be the question we ask, and that should be the first thing we think about. I think we'll feel better about the world, and the world will just literally be a better place.
Very well said. Well, just a couple more questions.
Sure.
This has been a really fun conversation. Thank you for taking.
Oh, thank you. This has been great.
Yeah. So one of the things that's been on my mind, just because it's been in the news a little bit, not a little bit, a lot, is this idea of effective altruism. It's related to the dominance of all this technology, entrepreneurs, and how they all have become or are attempting to become gurus. And I'm just curious, as someone who's essentially been engaged altruistically for their entire career, what do you think of effective altruism?
That's a good question, and I've been thinking a lot about it, especially as we both spend time in the Bay Area and the tech world, and which is very much kind of an epicenter of effective altruism. And if you tweak the algorithm the right way, you can save all these lives and do all this good work. I think any altruism is good. I think anyone who wants to give money to something as opposed to keeping it, and this is the way they want to give it, is better than them not giving it. I think I'm biased because people talk about, oh, well, bed nets fighting malaria is like a very ultra, in fact, it's like the paragon of, is put up in Africa. And it's a great way to save lives, but it's not the way to save lives. And someone may look at what we do and say, like, you're giving scholarships to girls. Like, I have no, that girl may end up as a quote unquote housewife. And so I'm giving all this money for a girl who's going to end up not using education to make the world appreciably better. And, or you're giving, are you deciding your patients for surgeries based on their effectiveness? Are you going to give someone with no job a surgery versus someone who's providing X number of points to the GDP? And I just think, no, you just want to do good and help this person. I think effective altruism doesn't take into account the person benefiting, the locus of the generosity, and looks at it in a macro sense, which I think you need to do, but it does that to the detriment of looking at it in terms of the individual. So I am not a huge proponent of it in terms of, like, we can't fit our work into an algorithm. We can't fit our work. We try to be effective in everything we do. I think our clinics are some of the most effective healthcare interventions in Nigeria to be able to, for relatively low cost, build a self-sustaining financially, a self-sustaining clinic that takes care of women and children and mortality, which is one of the worst problems for a society and its GDP and production possible. But I hope that those people who who purport to be effective altruists spend time in the field, quote unquote. Spend time, whether it's at a soup kitchen or locally wherever they live, and whether it's like in downtown LA or in Oakland or what have you, or go to Africa and see, like, the continent needs more than just bed nets. And I just wonder, these people who are purporting to be proponents of this, how much time they're spending on the other side of it. And I would imagine not much time. And so I think you find something that really speaks to your heart, that you feel like, wow, what a beautiful way to make the world a better place. I'm going to put my money and time and efforts here. And the results are the results. Yes, you want effective results. You want to, is money being well spent and what have you. But we're not going to solve the world's problems based on an algorithm or, like, where is this dollar most effectively going to be? Because the world is just, it is a messy place, and it's just fiercely resistant to algorithmic change for the positive.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I don't think there's anything really wrong with effective altruism. The idea is just trying to apply, like, a different lens to how do you help as many people as possible. Mm-hmm. And it's got this utilitarian background. But there is something about it to me that feels a little, like, inauthentic, is the way to describe it, and maybe robotic, and lacking the sort of human connection that you had to your mission, where yours comes from the family, and it was almost like there was no question for you how you were going to engage in service because of all of these things that you had in your life that brought it up. That to me seems like, for a human, like a better approach to giving, is to find something that really actually is authentic to you, rather than just robotically say, okay, if I provide these tents, I'm going to save a bunch of people from contracting malaria, which is a legitimate cause. Like, it's an incredibly legitimate cause, but that might not be the path for every single person. You're going to run out of tents before too long.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, again, for us, it's like our work is rooted in story. And we both live in LA, the center of story. Stories have always resonated with me. I picked up picture books before I could read, and I read every single possible book in the library growing up in our town. I just love story, and the idea, like, I'm going to sit across from you and tell a story, from a donor and tell this story. And I, like, 9 times out of 10, it's the story that resonates. Not, okay, so if I give you 5,000, then how many patients per whatever and all that. Most people don't think in terms of units and all that. And it's great if you do. But I think it's hard to be sustainable when you're just looking at, again, like, numbers and, like you said, like, you want something that speaks to your mind as well as your heart. And you do have to be able to balance those both. And I remember people often say, like, oh, well, why give to Africa? There's so many needs here. And I actually don't even engage in that debate because, again, I believe in the open hand versus closed fist. That people are either open hand or closed fist. Like that person is a closed hand, a closed fist. There's nothing I can say to pry that hand open. So I can say, well, look, you look at Africa, X number of dollars goes this way and that way. Like they're like, oh, now I'm going to give. Like they're just using that as an excuse not to give. Because I often ask them, well, what are you giving to in the U.S.? Oh, well, U.S. is messed up, and I hate Democrats, Republicans, and all that. I'm like, all right, well then, you're just not a generous person. In which case, like, good luck, and I wish you all the best, but like, I'm not going to try to win you over. So if I met with an effective altruist, and I have the numbers, we have numbers on everything we do. But if they're like, well, if I give this, will it lead to that, and that lead to this? I'm like, listen, this is not the. It's not the. I'm not gonna change our mission or bend over backwards or like or start to fudge things to make this quantifiable for you. Like here's a ways that it is quantifiable. So you try to meet people where they're at, and this will either speak to their heart or it won't. And I do all I can to hope that it does and work to make sure it does because I want everyone in the world to support this, but I know that's not going to happen. And so you kind of try to find your tribe and family and win them over and get them more excited about doing this. So,
okay, last question is a compound question. What position in football did you play, and were you able to find a reason to or a way to articulate in your head how playing football is an act of service?
Yeah, well, I was a defensive. I was a linebacker and was about to move to defensive end before I got injured. And this is probably going to go counter to everything I've said in the past, hour plus, but I just loved, and this is probably like not good to say given the condition of football, but I just love the violence of it. I love the physicality. I loved as a linebacker. I was the one making contact and tackling, and I still to this day have my high school sack record, and I just love that. I just loved just the contact and the violence, also the camaraderie of it. And this gets to your second question. I was kind of always the best player on the team. My brother, who we overlapped a couple of years, would disagree with that. But like when he wasn't on the team, I was the. And so, but there's being the best player, and there's being the captain and the leader. And so when I was younger, I was the best player. But then when I became captain in high school, and then 8th grade, and then again in high school my senior year, it was a whole different ball game in terms of being the best player is just I'm really good, and everyone's going to see how good I am. Being the leader is okay. Like this guy isn't running as fast as he should, and for conditioning, how do I get him to run faster? Or we just lost. How do I handle that? Or we won. How do I? Or like did I play my best? This person is tearing the team apart. How do you? And so looking at that in terms of service, everything, like being the best player is not necessarily being in service to the team. It's like, how do I get my sack stats? How do I get tackles? I want to be the one ending up in the paper and all that kind of stuff, which how old I am, like ending up in the newspaper. To like, how do I serve the team? And if I get no tackles, no sacks, and we win, I should be overjoyed. And if we lose and I get 3 sacks, I shouldn't be. And just sports in terms of pushing yourself, dealing with loss, doing, as I mentioned earlier, I personally would do well, but then see someone drop a game-winning pass, which happened, and how do you not hate that person the rest of your life? And so it's and then so much is out of your control in terms of you're one player out of 11 on the field. I think in this work, I can't control who gives and who doesn't. I can't control medical mission outcome. I can't control the government and how corrupt and difficult it is. I can't control recessions and housing crises and banking crises, which all affect donations and giving. A Hollywood strike that affects the work that we do in Hollywood. So it's just, how do you deal with what comes at you, and how do you keep your eye focused on service to the greater good, to the GEANCO family, which includes our supporters, our donors, our people in Nigeria, and sublimate my ego and my needs to that group. So I first started learning that on the field, and I'm be forever grateful for the lessons I learned.
Well, this is a perfect way to end this conversation, man. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Nick. It's been great. Thank you for having me on.
Yep. Thank you for listening to the Nick Halera Show. We hope you enjoyed the episode and would appreciate your help with spreading the word by sharing with your network on social. And until next time, remember, it's not about pursuing success to unlock fulfillment. It's about learning how to find fulfillment in the midst of success.